brothers and sisters, shalom, shalom. You are tuned into the Kingdom Road radio show, and this is your host, Joseph Israel. And ready for the Kingdom Road, walking on the Kingdom Road, walking by faith, not by sight. And it's a blessing to be here with you all today in this time and age, as for many people today is the holy day of Shavuot. For me, myself, I understand through studies, I'm not going to get into here, that it falls at the first day of this week, coming up the day after Shabbat, or Shabbat at sunset, the time of the outpouring of the Spirit. We are at that time, and I'm praying for the Spirit to outpour on everyone, as it says in the prophet Joel, that people will prophesy all over the world, as it happened with the apostles, that people, the Spirit was poured out them as they observed Shavuot in Jerusalem, being obedient to Torah and the Messiah. And we know there's a greater outpouring here in these last days. And I give thanks and praise for this time. So if you're celebrating Shavuot today and you're tuning in, I'm thankful. And if you're celebrating Shavuot later this weekend with me, when I'm going to do it, when a lot of people are, there's a little debate on this, and it's okay for people to not know or to choose one or the other times, because Paul says, let no one judge you in your feast keeping. That's where I'm going to start here. He says, actually in the book of Colossians, it says here, let no man therefore judge you in meat or drink, or in respect of a holy day, or new moon, or of the Sabbath, which are shadows of things to come. So these things are shadows of things to come. There's glorious things to come. The outpouring of the Spirit and all these things that are to come is really what the meat of the matter is. This is what it's really all about. And so it's tuning our hearts in to the most, ourselves as obedient, the times that we understand that we are supposed to be there. And His Spirit will guide us all to one understanding, because He is the one Elohim, and He sent His Son, the one Messiah, and there's really one faith. And eventually, all the error and confusion will be removed, and wherever any of us are wrong, if our heart is right, we'll just be humble and teachable, and we'll correct ourselves to be right with Him, because the Almighty is our leader. So this is a beautiful thing, and I send love to everybody, all of those that seek the truth and are striving for His blessings. Now, the scriptures teach us, as it says here in 1 Corinthians 1, or actually 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9, as it is written, the eye has not seen, nor the ear heard, neither has entered into the heart of man, the things which Elohim has prepared for them that love Him. So my brothers and sisters, greater things than anyone has ever conceived are in store for us all, as long as we love our Elohim and love Him with all our heart, all our mind, all our strength, all our life, all our soul. So we give thanks for this opportunity. There is His kingdom that is at hand is going to be a blessing for every righteous heart. It's going to bring all the righteous desires of everyone to pass. It's going to bring everlasting life and abundant life. And this is what we are striving for. This is the lifestyle of hope, living the Torah, living the commandments, loving our neighbor, learning of the prophecies, learning of who we are in this time. So who are we? The Most High has a name that He named us, and the name is Israel. Yahweh calls His people Israel. The name Israel means he who strives with El, or God. People understand El, but he who strives with El for His blessings. So the striving for His blessings is what makes you an Israelite. No matter what nation you come from, no matter what your lineage is, no matter what, we all come from Adam, we all come from Noah, and there was a split at that point, and later on there was a faithful forefather named Jacob, who had his name changed to Israel because he strove for the Most High's blessings. And the blessings that were given to Jacob are a universal blessing that will eventually, through the Messiah, fulfill and bless the whole earth, and every righteous heart who is striving in these last days for his blessings will be considered a true Israelite. So this show is called the Israel of Promise, because this is the nation that he is calling out of all nations in these last days. All right. The scriptures teach us, the Psalms teach us in Psalms 33, verse 12, how happy the nation whose God is Yahweh, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. Now, this is the nation that we're talking about today, and they are a happy nation, a blessed nation, a fortunate nation. The people he has chosen for his own inheritance. Why are they happy? Why are they blessed? Because he has given them, he has these things in store for them are greater than the eye has ever seen or the ear heard. And the Most High has these wonderful promises for you and me and everybody. So now turn to Isaiah 49:3, and it says this, and he said unto me, my servant thou art, Israel, in whom I will get myself glory, or through whom I will be glorified. This Israel, or those that strive for his blessings, are the ones that will actually glorify their Father. He will gain glory through them. Why? Because they actually observe his laws, his testimonies. They put his kingdom first. As the Messiah said, seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim, and all else will be added unto you. Seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness. Observing Yahweh's testimonies and living the righteous life, and all else will be added unto you. We are taught to pray, our Father who art in heaven, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Israel prays for this kingdom. His kingdom is the only government that will ever bring an everlasting peace, and it will be established forever. This is the message of the scriptures. As they said in the show before, as I was listening in, the most important thing is that we prove all things through the Word, that we study, because that's where the truth is, and that's where our foundation is. That's how we know who the Messiah is. That's how we know that we're Israelites. And he has a wonderful teaching for everyone who seeks. So you're willing to honor Yahweh and to put his laws in your hearts and do what you can to advertise his kingdom and his truth. You are an Israelite, and through each and every one of this Israel, he is going to be glorified. Now let's turn to Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 19 and 20. All right. Speaking of the idols of the world, the religions of the world, the false worship and the false gods of the world, Yahweh is telling us through the prophet Jeremiah that the portion of Jacob is not like them, or Yahweh is not like the gods of this world. You know, all the false religion. The truth has nothing to do with any of these religions. The portion of Jacob is not like them. For he is the former of all things. Yahweh is the creator. And Israel is the rod of his inheritance. Yahweh of hosts is his name. So Israel, they are his people. They're the one that received his inheritance. And Yahweh of hosts is his name. Yahweh is the one Almighty, who actually is with Israel. He is the portion of Jacob. This is Jacob and Israel are interchangeable because Jacob originally was the man who had his name changed from Jacob to Israel, and all who follow after him, all who continue on the path that he began, so to speak, become Israelites, as Jacob was. And Jacob, we're going to get into it. Jacob had 12 sons, and these were called the Israel, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But right now I'm talking about the Israel that's going to give the Most High the glory. This Israel, Yahweh says, verse 20, thou art my battle axe and weapons of war. For with thee I will break in pieces the nations, and with thee will I destroy kingdoms. Now, the Most High doesn't fight a carnal war. The Apostle Paul, Shaul, tells us that we fight not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places, against principalities and powers of darkness. And these things are the lies and deceptions, the corruption. These are the things that we wrestle against. But we do not fight against our brothers and sisters. Even if they're deceived, even if they're in the other nations, we don't take up carnal weapons. We love and we pray for people. We do not fight a physical fight. So when Yahweh says Israel is his battle axe and his weapon of war, this is a spiritual war. This isn't a physical war. This battle is Yahweh's. Israel are the ones that preaches good news of his kingdom. They teach the truth. The world becomes acquainted with Yahweh. They become his kingdom is advertised, as I said earlier. The message, the knowledge fills the earth as the waters covers the sea. From one end of the earth to the next, everyone will come to know Yahweh through Israel, and this is actually a war, because the deception and the lies that are in the world become exposed by this, and people will have a choice. Right now, the people, for the most part, have been deceived. They've never heard of this, but one day soon, Yahweh is going to magnify his message. His kingdom is going to become top news story, and people are going to learn about it, and they're going to have a choice to make. And this will bring a destruction to the deceptions and the strongholds of the devil's system, and the devil's system in general will collapse because of this. Now, so Israel has a mission. They're made for this purpose, for this spiritual war. Israel, as it said in Isaiah 49:3, you are my servant, through whom I will be glorified. Here it says that Israel is the rod of his inheritance, and Israel is the battle axe and weapons of war, and with them he's going to destroy the nations. Now, all right, this is a beautiful thing. Returning to that original, what the name of Israel means, it means he who strives with God for his blessings. Let's turn to the original promise given to Jacob, Genesis 32:24 through 28. Genesis 32:24. Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the break of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. And he said, I will not let thee go, except that you bless me. And he said unto him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince you have power with Elohim and men, and have prevailed. Or you have striven with Elohim and with men, and have prevailed. So because Jacob had strove for the blessing, he was blessed. And he got this name, and he knew that this wasn't a man. He knew this was an angel, and this was actually confirmed later, at a later date. Let's see here. If we turn to Genesis 35, Yahweh again spoke to him, of course, through his angels. In verse 9 of Genesis 35, and Elohim appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram, and blessed him. And Elohim said unto him, your name is Jacob. Your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. And he called his name Israel. And Elohim said unto him, I am El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And Elohim went up from him. All right, so there we have it. The Most High confirmed it. His name is Israel because he strove for the blessings. And he goes on to say, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations will come, or a family of nations, showing again there's a deeper thing to this, that Israel will be made up of many nations. All right. Wonderful. This is feeling good today. You are tuned into the Kingdom Road Radio, and this is the study, or the radio show, studying the Word about the Israel of promise. All right, so Yahweh has spoken about his blessed prophet Jacob, who had his name changed to Israel. And then we've also gone over where Isaiah and Jeremiah talks about an Israel that's going to bring glory and honor to their father and be used for a spiritual war and to bring blessings to the human race. Now, we have to compare that with some other scriptures. Let's go to Amos 8. The prophet Amos he's speaking, he gets a message from Yahweh that actually speaks against Israel. It says here in Amos 8, verse 1 and 2. And Yahweh, the sovereign Yahweh, showed unto me, and behold, a basket of summer fruit. And he said, Amos, what do you see? And I said, a basket of summer fruit. Then said Yahweh unto me, the end has come upon my people Israel. I will not again pass by them any more. Okay, so here we have, we just read about the blessings of Israel. They were his battle axe and weapon of war. They're going to bring him honor. But here he says, the destruction is ripe for Israel. The end has come. He will not again pass by them anymore. This appears to be an inconsistency upon the people that we've just proven that he's going to bless. But here, so we know the Most High cannot be inconsistent. So this has to be 100% true, that the end has come upon his people Israel, and at the same time, he has a blessing in store for Israel. So we're going to find out the difference here. One Israel was done away with, and one Israel is going to be established forever. It's if we turn now to the book of Hosea, starting at verse 6 through verse 10. And she conceived again and bore a daughter. And Elohim said unto him, call her name Leruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. Okay, so verse 6 says, he will not have mercy upon the house of Israel, but he will utterly take them away. So there, again, he's speaking of doing away with the house of Israel. Now, when it says here, the house of Israel, it should be understood that it's the whole organization of Israel, the Israel of old. Now, verse 9. Then said verse 8 and 9. Now, when she had weaned Leruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. Then Elohim call his name Lo Ami, for you are not my people, and I will not be your Elohim. So there's something going on here. One, the Israel Isaiah speaking of is a people that is going to glorify their father. He's going to use them for a spiritual war. And the Israel that Hosea was given the message about is one that they are not his people, and he will not be their Elohim. So he's basically showing us here, it's the heart condition he's looking at, and the arrangement that he had with the Israel of old, he's doing away with it, but he's going to restore, he's going to gather a new Israel, because it goes on and it says in verse 10, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea. So don't worry, his promise will come to pass, which cannot be measured nor numbered, and it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living God. So this is the time, this is the Israel of promise. There was a time when there was no Israel, but now he's going to restore Israel. And those who weren't Israel now have a chance to be Israel. Now, why? Because Israel means those that strive for his blessings. So in these days, Israel is being called presently out of all tongues, tribes, and nations. The promised Israel. Now let's turn. Actually, we'll end right there. We'll take a little break, and when we get back, we're going to start in Romans chapter 9. If you're following with me with your scriptures, turn to Romans chapter 9 and enjoy a little music and a little break. All right, you are tuned into the Messianic Lamb Radio, and this is the Kingdom Road Radio Show.
Just not getting along. carry on. Held down by the politician, kept in economic prison. What is the solution to mankind's problems? There will be no oppression in Jah kingdom. There will be no transgression. Yeah, yeah. Bring your hearts and not your garments. Set your mind to the land of promise. I see you living with equality, cause we are children of the Almighty. Living in communities, that's the way it's supposed to be, yeah. Living in true harmony, raising our families. There will be no oppression in Jah's kingdom. There will be no transgression. Yeah, yeah. Children out in the streets can't get no food to eat. Hey, now, to the world leaders, telling them done such a horrible job. I said you have to go down. There will be no oppression in Jah kingdom. There will be no transgression. Yeah, yeah. These are the healer, these are the cure. The promises from Jah Jah, they are for sure. There will be no sick or no elderly, no rich, no poor. There will be no homeless when all is restored. With your knowledge and your faith, you have to endure and deal with righteousness forevermore. Long day, you deal with righteousness forevermore. There will be no oppression in Jah's kingdom. There will be no transgression. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There will be no oppression in Jah kingdom. There will be no transgression. Alright, to all my hungry people on the street, you will have so much food to eat. Whether there's and nothing there, you will see the life-giving streams. Children in despair and sorrow, keep it hope for the bright tomorrow. Jah.
All right. Welcome back. Yes, the kingdom of the Almighty is our hope. Yeah. No sorrow, no sickness, death, or pain. So today we're talking about the Israel of promise, and we just went over how that there was blessings, how happy and blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yahweh, and this is Israel, those that strive for his blessings. However, the Israel of old, as many you study it, you'll know that they were disobedient for the most part as a nation. Now there was definitely faithful ones, and they are the true Israelites. You have like Samuel, you have all the prophets, and many people that were obedient with the prophets. They were the righteous ones. And for the majority of the time, though, the nation went astray. Even when they came out of Egypt, one of the first things they did was build a golden calf when Moses was gone. So we can find that for many of them, their heart was not truly in it. They were along for the ride, so to speak, with Moses. But when Moses was gone, they began to disobey. When Moses was about to pass away, Yahweh told them they were going to disobey. Joshua warned them when he was about to pass away, If you read the book of Judges, you know that it went astray so many times, and there would be an inspired man or woman who would become a leader or a prophet or a judge, and she would get the faith, inspiration flowing for them again. However, it would wane and fade away again and again and again, all the way to when they rejected the prophets. They asked to have a king. Their first king, Shaul, he disobeyed, lost the kingdom. David was obedient for the most part, a righteous king, such a wonderful soul, a man after Yahweh's own heart. And his son Solomon, they reigned as kings in righteousness. Solomon did follow astray for a time, but repented at the end. And no one is perfect, but the thing is that scriptures let us know that the Most High intends for His people to be purely devoted to Him, and we have all the scriptures, all the examples of faith and disobedience and all these things to learn from. The thing is that the fact that Israel, in the days of Jeremiah, Israel and Judah were all one nation, Israel. However, after Solomon, because of the disobedience that had crept in by that time, the nation was split. 10 tribes were Israel, and the rest were with Judah. It was called Judah. Levi and Benjamin were with Judah. Now, the 10 tribes became known as Ephraim, and that has a spiritual and prophetic significance too. But the whole thing is He always intended to have one nation. But Israel, the 10 tribes, Ephraim, went astray and were conquered and scattered by Assyria and removed from the Holy Land before Judah. Then Judah, a few years later, continued in the disobedience like Israel and worshiping false gods and breaking the Torah, not observing the Sabbath and all these things. And they were overtaken by Babylon and went into exile. And they were basically, even though they got to return and rebuild His temple and live in Jerusalem, they never got back their kingdom ever again. They were always a vassal state. And even today, in the land of Israel, though they have a nation that man has made called Israel, it's not the one the Almighty made. There's no true worship as far as organized by the nation. There's no Messiah. There's no king on the throne of David. It has not been restored. That's just a political nation that the nations have built in their own uninspired direction that they go with. So that has nothing to do with the true Israel. So what is the true Israel? And if Yahweh's done away with a certain Israel of old and how He dealt with them, who is going to make them the true Israel? And is there still hope for Israel? Well, there obviously is, because He has an Israel that's going to bring Him blessings and glorify Him and work for Him. And so, Paul addressing this situation, or Shaul the apostle, in Romans chapter 9, this is what he has to say. Let's see here. Verse 6. It's not as though the word of Elohim has taken none effect. For they are not all Israel which are of Israel. Or not everyone who was born of Israel are truly of Israel in the truest sense. Neither because they are the seed of Abraham are they all children, but through Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of Elohim, but the children of promise are counted for the seed. Okay, so just because someone was fleshly descendant from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, doesn't make them a true Israelite, because their heart could be, they could go to idolatry, they could become worldly, they could do anything they wanted. They don't have to necessarily obey Torah. That might not be in their heart. They don't have to keep the commandments. They don't have to love their neighbor and worship Yahweh. A man is able to freely choose. What they choose proves if they strive for His blessings. And those that aren't born of the natural lineage of the flesh of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that do choose to serve Yahweh and to strive for His blessings, these are the children of promise. These make up the Israel of promise. So what you have here is going to be a nation made up of all nations, or all nationalities or tribes. People coming from different languages, different tongues, different tribes. This will be made up of Jews and the nations. Now, so it's not as though the Most High's word has failed, even though he had done away with Israel of old. The new Israel is going to be made up of all people of the same heart condition, that have the same heart condition as Jacob did. And this will be the requirement. Now, in the Living Bible translation of Romans 9:6-8, it says this: well then, has God failed to fulfill his promises to the Jews or to Israel? No, for these promises are only to those who are truly Jews or truly Israel. And not everyone born into a Jewish family is truly a Jew. Just the fact that they come from Abraham doesn't make them truly Abraham's children. For the scriptures say that the promises apply only to Abraham's son Isaac and Isaac's descendants, though Abraham had other children too. This means that not all of Abraham's children are children of God, but only those who believe the promise of salvation which he made to Abraham. Now, they emphasized a little extra there, but they basically got the meaning, and it's through Isaac. Abraham had many sons, but only Isaac the blessing came through. Who did Isaac picture? Isaac was a type and a picture of the Messiah, the promised Messiah who was to come. He came according to the Most High's promise. He was the one who Abraham was commanded to sacrifice on the mountain. This pictured the death and resurrection of Joshua. I mean, Isaac pictured the Messiah, and it's actually through Isaac, or through Mashiach, through Yeshua, that Israel is gathered, because he becomes the king of Israel. Now, this isn't the only place this is spoken of. Let's go to Romans 11, verse 25 and 26. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery. So here's the mystery: that you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the nations come in. So all Israel will be saved. So here we have all Israel is made up of the Israelites of the flesh and the Israelites of the nations. Now, so the whole thing is the original Israel that he gathered out of Egypt was made up of fleshly descendants of Jacob. And that was mainly the requirement. The new Israel that he's gathering out of the nations, the world, which is Egypt was a type of the devil system that we live in today. He's going to bring us out in a greater exodus through the greater Moses, the Messiah Yahshua, and we're going to exodus to his promised land. And this is going to be made up of people of all tongues, tribes, and nations that actually have the heart condition. That's the requirement now. It's through faith, and that they become true Israel. They become the Israelites. Now, Paul goes even deeper into this. If we turn to Romans chapter 2, verse 28 and 29. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. He is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of Elohim. This is some very deep understanding here, to understand who a true Jew, a true Israelite is not one just fleshly a Jew. That doesn't guarantee that you're a true Jew. What it is that how inwardly, if you are your inner man, your inner self, man or woman, if they consecrate their heart and mind to serve the Most High, and they're serving the God of Israel, they become a true Jew, a true Israelite. And their circumcision, you could be circumcised in the flesh and still not be circumcised in the heart. So actually the thing that matters is if we cut off the foreskin of our heart, or that which the separation, that's what's keeping us from being humble to the Most High, or the disobedience, the flesh that's keeping us from living in the spirit, so to speak. Is keeping us from being pure in our devotion. This will be, we need to correct ourselves. We need to circumcise our heart from our own selfish desires and put Yahweh's will first. This is actually what matters. This will prove who true Israel is. They're scattered throughout all nations. Yahweh is an Elohim that loves all people. We find actually in the book of Acts, they understood this also in the first century. Obviously, all these writings are coming from the 1st century, but Peter, the apostle, Kepha, said this in Acts chapter 10, verse 34 through 36. And Kepha, or Peter, opened his mouth and said, "Of a truth, I perceive that Elohim is no respecter of persons, and in every nation he that fears him and works righteousness is accepted with him. And the word of Elohim sent unto the children of Israel, preaching the peace by Yahshua the Messiah. He is sovereign of all." So we find out, if you study the book of Acts, that these Holy Spirit poured out on the Jews and the Gentiles, showing that they were all accepted. But not every Jew got it, and not every Gentile got it. Now everybody whose heart was right, they were chosen. They were going to strive for the blessings. They became Israel. If we turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, showing you that Peter even knew, just to clarify and definitely outline what he was saying there. In the first book of Peter, chapter 2, it says this, verse 9 and 10. "You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation." Now he's quoting the Torah here. "A peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who has called you out of darkness into a marvelous light. We were once in darkness, deceived and lost, but the Most High has called us to be his holy nation, which in times past were not a people, but are now the people of your way." What is their name? Israel, who have not obtained mercy, but now you've obtained mercy. You are his children. He's going to gather us out. "Israel, you are my servant, through whom I will be glorified." This is Yahweh's people. This is his nation. Now, the prophet, Yochanan, the immerser, John the Baptist. Let's see what he has to say in the book of Luke. We'll find that this understanding is actually, it's all throughout the scriptures, and it's important. So he was preaching, he was prophesying that the Mashiach's presence was at hand, that the kingdom was at hand, and that Israel, this was still under the original Israel, the house of Israel. And so basically what I'm saying here is that the house of Israel of old, the way, the arrangement, not the individuals, but the house, which was made up of fleshly descendants only, basically. And there was a few, like they actually, just to pause there, like they brought out in the show before, Ruth. She was from Moab. Moab, in a sense, it typifies America in these days. Moab was a commercially rich nation and pictured capitalism, but it was of the world. It wasn't Yahweh's people. But we are coming out of Moab, so to speak, to serve Yahweh like Ruth. Ruth was accepted then, showing that always the Most High intended for all nations to become his people. That, Ruth was a mighty example of that. However, in the end, the Most High's purpose in the beginning will be what's in the end. And in the beginning, it was that all people will be blessed and gain eternal life. And in the end, that's exactly what happens. Those that choose to serve him, and those that repent and do what's right, and to love their neighbor and do justice and kindness, these ones will gain eternal life, and to follow his precepts. So he always intended to bless all nations. He used Israel, the descendants of Jacob, for types and examples of things to do and things not to do, and what he's going to do that we can learn of. And he's going to restore this nation, but it's going to be made up of the faithful Israelites of the flesh and the faithful people of the nations. Now, John the Baptist, or Yochanan, says this in Luke chapter 3, verse 7 through 9, when people were coming to him. It says this, "Then said he unto the multitudes that came forth to be baptized of him, O generation of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath that is to come? Bring forth thus, therefore, fruits worthy of repentance, and begin not to say within yourselves, We have Abraham to our father. For I say unto you, the Elohim is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham." Okay, so there it is. Being a literal descendant of Abraham is not going to get you in. The Most High can make children of Abraham out of anybody. So, and now he goes on, "And now the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Every tree, therefore, which brings not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast to the fire." This is when he says Israel, I'm done with you. You are not my people. He's speaking to the disobedient nation. And he's going to, when he speaks of Israel, how blessed is the nation whose Elohim is your way. These are his true Israel. These are the ones, the holy nation, the chosen priesthood, the peculiar people, called out of darkness into his marvelous light in the last days to be his chosen ones. Now, continuing on with that, we'll keep going forth when we get back from this break. So everybody enjoy this. And you are tuning into Kingdom Road Radio. This is your host, Joseph Israel. And we've been talking about the Israel of Promise. And I'll be back after this.
So I know we can make the change for the better. That's right. There's a better way. Now is the day that we have a time. Don't let it slip away. Make a change in all your life. Be an example, shine the light. Oh, oh, there's a better way. Now is the day that we have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make a change in all your life. Be an example, shine the light. Well, take it to heart. Everything in the world plays its part. Remember Lot's wife turned to a pillar of salt. Nothing they could do to stop this from reaching you. Seeking for see how you want, you know just what to do. Many called and the chosen few, but no matter what you have, remember him that gave his life for you, so you could take your stand, and then you'll overstand the universal covenant he made with Abraham. There's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make a change in all your life. Be the example and shine your light. Oh, oh, there's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make this change in all your life. Be the example and shine your light. Well, government scheme they will take away. Like Sodom and Gomorrah, they're corrupt in other ways. Don't you be confused and don't be captivated. The lifestyle that they choose is completely overrated. They murder, they rob, they rape and abuse. On top of it all, the earth they pollute. The preacher, the teacher, and the recruit. Well, all of them are running from the rising of the truth. There's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make a change in all your life. Be an example, shine your light. Oh, oh, there's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. Hey, hey. You can make a change. Yeah. Remember Eve came from Adam's rib. Out of one, so as one we must live. One God, one King, one righteous community. Once lost, now found. Everybody know that duty. Many roads, many rivers. It's up to your choosing. One leads to life, the other you lose. And rejoice and proclaim your cry was not in vain. Well, I may fade away, but his word remains the same. There's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make the change in all your life. Be the example, so shine the light. Oh, oh, there's a better way. Now is the day that you have a time. Don't let it slip away. You can make the change in all your life. You are the example, so shine the
Yes, that is the song Better Way. And before that, you heard Jock Kingdom. Those are the two songs we played today. Jock Kingdom is on my first album called Gone Are the Days, and Better Way is on an EP called Be Not Dismayed, and it will also be on my upcoming CD called Kingdom Road, which you're on. You are tuned in to the Kingdom Road radio show. This is the theme I've been feeling for a long time, that we're on a path out of this confused world. This is a message of hope, and it's actually more than a message. It's the way we live. It's the way we love. It's what we breathe. That there is a better way to, and we can make the change. The Most High provides the way, and He has sent His only begotten Son because He loved the world, and whoever should believe in Him should not perish, but should have life. And His Son's name was Yahshua. Yahshua means Yahweh is our salvation, or Yahweh salvation. And today we've been talking about the Israel promise. And so getting back into that and how the Messiah, Yahshua, will become part of Israel, or the king of Israel, because he was Israel. Obviously, he came from a faithful mother, Mary. She's a part of the Israel promise. And Yahshua is beautiful because his heart condition, he was obviously an Israel of the flesh and an Israel of the promise. He fulfills all of the levels. And there's many Yehudis, righteous Jews, that are true Israelites. And there has always been, even of all the 12 tribes, there was righteous Israelites. And so I'm not discrediting anyone that was a faithful man or woman of faith. They will make up his nation of Israel. They are part of the Israel promise. And they, from Abraham, even Noah, even before there was an Israelite, those faithful prophets are going to come back and actually be a part of Yahweh's Israel. The prophets of old are to return. A lot of wonderful things are going to happen. Like I said at the beginning of the show, eye hasn't seen, ear hasn't heard of the blessing in store for those that love our Elohim. He's got it prepared, my brothers and sisters. We are on the kingdom road. So continuing on here about the Israel promise, when Yahshua was about to be born, this is what the angel said to his mother in verse 31 of Luke chapter 1. And it says, "And behold, you shall conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and you shall call him Yahshua. He shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and Yahweh Elohim shall give him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end." There it is. He reigns over Jacob. Jacob is Israel. They're the same forever. This is the one who is to be enthroned forever. His kingdom, there will be no end. This is the one, the promised one, that every faithful Jew, every faithful Israelite, everyone, this has been the hope of everybody that has ever trusted in the words of the prophets. He is the one, and he has come, and now he's beginning to reign over his people, Israel, in these last days. Now, in fulfillment of this prophecy, the prophet Micah says, even where he was to be born, everyone knows, if they studied, the Yahshua, who the world calls Jesus, was born in Bethlehem. And the prophet Micah, who was a contemporary of Isaiah, was given this vision in Micah 5 verse 2. "But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be the king," or ruler in Israel. This is the one, Yahshua the Messiah. He is to sit upon the throne of his father David. He will rule over Jacob, and the increase of his kingdom, there shall be no end. All right. So continuing on, it is faithful nation, happy is the nation whose Elohim is Yahweh. Let's turn to Isaiah chapter 26, verse 2. And it says this: "Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keeps the faith may enter in." And this is what he wants us, the righteous nation that keeps the truth. Other translations will say that they may enter. This is Israel. "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusts in thee. Trust you in Yahweh forever, for Yahweh is everlasting strength." My brothers and sisters, this is the one we've been waiting for, Yahweh of hosts. He's the one. And you are the nation, the righteous nation that keeps the truth, that they may enter. Now, let's continue on. Let's turn to Isaiah chapter 43. More blessings for the Israel of promise. Okay. Isaiah chapter 43, speaking of the restored Israel, or the Israel of promise, that he is going to be gathering and is actually in the process of gathering. That's why we are here today. He says this, "But now thus says Yahweh that created thee, O Jacob, that formed thee, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed thee, and I have called thee by thy name. You are mine." And he actually goes on, and it actually says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon you. For I am Yahweh thy Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior." Now, in verse 5, "Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bring thy seed from the east, and gather thee from the west. I will say unto the north, Give up, and to the south, keep not back. Bring my sons and daughters from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Every one that is called by my name, for I have created him for my honor. I have formed him. Yes, I have made him." This is Yahweh is gathering his nation out of all tongues and tribes and nations throughout the earth. And he goes on in verse 10 and says, "You are my witnesses, says Yahweh, and my servant who I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there was no El formed, neither shall there be after me. I, even I am Yahweh, and besides me there is no Savior." Okay, so Yahweh declares that it's Israel that are his witnesses. It's Israel that are his people. And in verse 21 it says, "This people I have formed for myself, they shall show forth my praise." This is Yahweh's blessing. He made Israel. He is calling you out. Israel are those that strive for his blessings. And he's no respecter of persons as to our lineage, or, there's only one actual human race. There's no races. There were different tribes and nationalities, national groups, so to speak, that have actually come because of the different families, how they split. But we are all one race. We all stem from Adam, and we've all been purchased by the Messiah, and now we must obey. And there's a lot to this purpose. It's a very deep thing, but Israel are the ones that are putting Yahweh's kingdom first. They're putting his laws in their heart. They're going to strive with all their might for these blessings. They're not going to give up until they see Yahweh's kingdom covering this earth, till they see the message spread to everyone, and everyone that is thirsty will have a chance to drink of these waters of life for free. Now, these are the Israelites who go out publishing and spreading this beautiful message. Israel are Yahweh's witnesses, and that's their job, to be a faithful and true witness, just like the Messiah, who was actually called the faithful and true witness. Now, let's go to Isaiah 49 and where we started. He says, verse 1, "Listen, O islands, unto me, and hearken, you people from afar. Yahweh has called me from the womb, and from the bowels of my mother he made mention of my name." So before, Yahweh already had this purpose for Israel before there ever was an Israel. "He has made my mouth like a sharp sword. He has given Israel the truth." This is the Israel of promise. "In the shadow of his hand he has hid me, and made me a polished shaft in his quiver he has hid me." Israel is like a hidden sword, or a hidden weapon that he's only going to use at the right time, which is in the very last days when Israel is needed, and when his kingdom comes, he uses Israel to bring his glory. Verse 3, "And said unto me, You are my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be honored." Israel will bring Yahweh the honor. Israel will bring Yahweh the glory. Now, as we talked about, what makes up Israel? Israel are those that strive for the blessings, as Jacob did. And I just want to tell everyone, I love you. Have a blessed Shavuot. Continue on seeking first the King and his kingdom. Spread it to your neighbor, for this good news of Yahweh's kingdom must be spread throughout the earth. Let us love each other, and we will be able to make up his Israel of promise. I love you, and until next week, this is your host, Joseph Israel. You've tuned into Messianic Lamb Radio. I love you. Yahweh be with you. Shalom.
He will lead, we must follow. This is reality, yes I know. When you lead, the blessings follow. cross over Jordan. Are you ready to meet the promised land? Wisdom is crying, knowledge sings. Famine of Yahweh in the land, kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The light of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom road. He will lead, we must follow. This is reality, yes I know. Where he leads, blessings follow. That's why we trodden on his kingdom road, kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The light of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom road. Kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The Lamb of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom road.
The teachings and music on Messianic Lamb Radio are made available by the generous donations of listeners like you. Thank you.